You're listening to the Wrigleyville Nation podcast. Season ticket holders and lifelong fans with neighborhood ties discuss Cubs news and neighborhood happenings. Here's your hosts, Jeremy and Pat.
Hello and welcome to the Wrigleyville Nation podcast. This is episode 308 of the podcast. My name is Jeremy Deemer and I'll be your host. I'm joined as always by my co-host. He's my cousin and he's high atop Wrigleyville tonight. How's it going, Pat?
It's going well, Jeremy. How are you?
It's a cold and rainy night here in Chicago. I was watching the games in LA and on Friday and Saturday saying, feels like LA here in April. How refreshing. It's great. And then reality check, we're right back. I was telling people, reminding them, Pat, how many times we've been to games that have been snowed out in April. So expectations tempered as the weather turns back to remind us about what spring in Chicago is all about. But thank goodness we've got lots of Cubs happenings to talk about, and to help us break down all of the week that was, the week that will be, and everything going on with the Cubs. You know him from his work at CHGO. Ryan Herrera, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining us to talk Cubs tonight.
Yeah, thanks for the invite, guys. Jeremy, Patrick, nice to see you. And I'm excited.
The first time I got to meet Ryan was at Lizzie McNeil's during the Cubs convention. So it was good to get to meet you in person. Glad we finally got you on the podcast. As a first-time appearance, we always love a good origin story. So we do want to catch up our listeners who might not be too familiar with your journey. How did you end up getting to work with the CHGO guys, getting to cover the Cubs beat?
A lot of luck went into it, I'll tell you that much. I from the Chicago area, family's been Cubs fans growing up and everything. So just obviously a lot of good background knowledge of the organization. And went to school, went to University of Missouri, journalism school, the whole journalism, the Missouri method, all that stuff. Anyone that has been to Missouri knows how much we like to hype it up. Had gotten to a few programs, made some friends in the industry, and coming out of college, had an internship, and after that, as I was in an internship, I was down in Houston actually, and a opening for a seasonal reporting job at MLB.com opened up, and a friend that had worked for MLB.com sent it to me. Applied just on a whim. It sounded interesting. Not that I had covered baseball a whole lot, but obviously, as I said, Cubs fans, my whole family growing up, knew the game well enough that I think I could do it. And got the job there. Was a kind of a backup filling in at Wrigley or up in Milwaukee or on the south side, doing that all season. And then, after it was a seasonal job. So once the 2021 season ended, because it was 2021, when that ended, it was what's next for a few months there. And then, lo and behold, another friend that I made that worked at MLB.com got word that someone was looking, a new company was starting and looking for someone to cover the Cubs. And having done that at least a few times during the 2021 season, just kind of threw my hat in the ring and ended up working out. So, yeah, like I said, maybe luck isn't the right word. I do think that, even though I'm only 26, I think I worked hard. I made the right friends, and I feel like I do a good job. But it was kind of a thing where it was like right place, right time, right people, right opportunity that kind of all fell into place at just kind of when I needed it. So a little luck, a little bit of hard work, and yeah, that's my journey.
And as someone who was a Cubs fan growing up, what was your kind of your childhood team, your childhood moment? What was your Cubs fan defining moment for you?
This is so weird, but 2006, we all know 2006 was a really bad team. 96 losses, if I remember correctly. But my 10th birthday, September 27th, 2006, I don't remember who was on base, but Henry Blanco was at bat. It was a Cubs Brewers game. Henry Blanco was at bat, and for whatever reason, I was a big Henry Blanco guy. I don't even know if he was the starting catcher for that team at that point. I think it was Barrett. But Henry Blanco was at the plate, knocked him in. I was at Wrigley. My parents took me for my birthday. Henry Blanco walk-off single. Cubs beat the Brewers. I want to say it was like a 3-2 win, something like that. Walked it off, and that was like, it was a 10-year-old. As a 10-year-old, you don't really understand that that team was just horrible, right? Like you kind of have the guys you look up to. And when Henry Blanco is my guy and he gets like, that was one of those really early moments where I'm like, okay, like Cubs fandom's cool.
Walk-off single.
Oh.
That's probably the highlight of the season, really. What year did the Cubs? When Ryan mentioned Michael Barrett, it reminded me of the game we were at against the White Sox. Was that 96? Do you remember who was pitching that game for the Cubs? He's still a pitcher in the major leagues, I think.
Was Rich Hill pitching that game?
Yeah,
yes, that's right.
Yeah.
not pitching well, but pitching. Yeah.
So that was in 2000. So that was the 2006 season. Yep. So you are correct. Yep.
2006. Yeah, that's right. I said 96. I meant 2006. Sorry.
Yes. So, that was definitely a fun memory all around. And so Ryan, how often do you get to do you go to Wrigley to cover games in person?
So when they're at home, I'm generally at every game. Try to be, especially just traveling is obviously a little harder than just going to Wrigley and being from Chicago. So try to be at every game. Jeremy, Jared Willis, one of our coworkers. So every once in a while, he helps us out on the Sox and the Cubs side. So he, will fill in and give me a day off whenever I've been working a lot. Because baseball's every day. Like there's not a lot of off time in baseball. So, but for the most part, try to be. They got 81 home games. Try to be at as many of them as I can because. One, it makes it easier to do my job, being around the team every day, being in the clubhouse, talking to David Ross, whoever. Makes it easier to do my job. It's always nice to be at the ballpark. I love being at the ballpark, especially Chicago summer. You can't really beat it. But yeah, so I'd say above 90% of home games at least is where I try to be there.
So far this season, how much different is the vibe with this team off to a pretty decent start as compared with previous seasons here? So how is that experience going so far?
Oh man, it's like night and day versus this last year, 2022. Like we knew what it was going in, and hey, if they surprised everyone, like that would have been pretty cool. But within the first few weeks of the season, you knew that wasn't going to happen. Like this is a badly constructed team that, unless like the 99th percentile of things happen, like they weren't going to be a very good team. And obviously it didn't happen, right? But this year is like they have. I think the main thing is that they may not have improved the ceiling of the team as much, but they really did improve the floor. They brought in a bunch of veteran guys, as much as people don't like Eric Hosmer, even Trey Mancini or whoever it is, like they brought in veterans that at the very worst were going to, play solid defense. Maybe, they knew how to be successful at the big league level just because they'd done it in the past. So it wasn't a bunch of rookies or first or second year players getting thrown out there. It was guys that know how to play the game of baseball at the major league level. And even if they don't play to their best abilities, you still feel you feel good about the solid floor that they bring. And, I said it going into the season, it felt like a 500 team with maybe that kind of deviation of five wins either which way, right? I think on one of our shows, I predicted like 85 wins, which, felt a little more optimistic than general, but, it felt like a much more competitive team. Going into the season, felt like it was going to be a more competitive team. Pitching was better. Defense was great. Offense could surprise, some potential to surprise. And that's what it's been so far. The pitching, you look at the series in LA, like they held the Dodgers to, was it 6 runs, something like that? those were really good pitching performances outside. Michael Fulmer's, he blew that save on Saturday. Okay. But you know what? Overall, the pitching, the defense was good, and they hit a bunch of home runs that you didn't expect. So it's a team that they're getting matched up against the Dodgers or the Rangers or the Mariners and are competing. And that's really all you can ask out of the team that at this point in the quote unquote rebuild is be competitive, be in the close games, win some of them obviously, but show that you are in the right direction, on the right track to where Jed Hoyer has said this team is supposed to go, right? Like the last couple of years, there was the teardown and the bad season in the beginning of the rebuild. Now you've built a better team that may have playoff aspirations, as far-fetched as some might see that. Some type of playoff aspirations, and right now they're 2 games over 500. They're actually competing, and you feel a different vibe at Wrigley than you've had in quite a while.
There might actually be some pressure to improve the team at the trading deadline rather than sell it off at the rate they're going.
Yeah, and that's one of the things. It's like, 2021, the trade deadline obviously hurt a lot of Cubs fans, and I think there's still a lot of Cubs fans that have not come back after that. Like they're still waiting for the team to prove that selling off all their heroes wasn't a mistake, right? 2022, by I don't know, the third week of April, like May at least, mid-May at the latest, like you knew this was going to be a trade-off team, right? And this year you're looking at it like, hey, this team might actually be in a position where they don't have to sell all their best trade pieces anymore. Like, maybe they do still trade Michael Fulmer or Brad Boxberger in I think August 1st might be the trade deadline this year. Maybe they still do that, but you know what? It's not because they're just trying to sell off all their trade pieces. It's because these guys are a little more expendable and they have other bullpen options coming up. That may be the case, right? But right now it's like it feels like just better to not be looking forward to asking Ian Happ about trade deadline, right? I mean, how he feels about possibly being traded. And, the extension he signed, it was one thing. It obviously helps that. But it's also, even if that didn't happen, right now you may not be sitting here. Even if he wasn't assigned to that extension, we're not sitting here saying like, oh, we're ready for 3 more months of asking Ian Happ about being traded. Like this team may actually be in a different position in, what is it, 3.5 months from now, which is a good thing.
The Cubs have won 3 straight series. They've been competitive in both the losses, like you described, both the Seattle and the Dodgers loss. After we finished recording last week, the Cubs walked it off in the 10th against Seattle. This was super fun, super exciting. The next night, Nelson Velasquez hits his first career grand slam, helping the Cubs with a huge comeback win after a huge deficit, coming back in the 3rd inning. These are the Cubs giving fans fun moments already in April, and they were at a premium last year, and so I'm feeling spoiled. I don't know about you, Pat, as a fan enjoying this. Already we're seeing 3 series victories and in a row, and we're getting these moments, and I'm having a good time. It's just fun. We're having fun again.
Yeah, I think the Cubs are definitely making. I mean, look, rolling this back just a little bit. The Cubs are 2 games over 500, right? So it's not like they start off 13-1 like Tampa Bay.
Well,
I think what's given people, or 13-0, I guess, right? What's giving people optimism is that they seem to be playing well in all their games, and they are doing it. It's kind of fun. Like I happened to watch that whole Tuesday night game. I had on in the background after the Cubs fell behind like 7-1 or something. I think I turned the sound down, but I can hear the crowd from my window, so I know when to look up, right? So it's kind of that way I can only look up when good things are happening. And sure enough, they that was one of those wins. It reminds me of was it against Seattle?
It was against
maybe?
Seattle,
yeah. Was that in 2016?
Yep, Lester. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Lester. Was Contreras? Was that his first game? I can't remember when he hits the home run.
No, the Contreras' first game was like a day game before that, because I went to that game. Okay. That was different.
Yeah. Well, in any event, it was one of those games. It was the Lester. It was just fun because you thought you were going to lose and then you win, and sometimes those are those games can give you more confidence, both as fans and maybe even as players, than ones where you're winning from the beginning. And so that got them off, to a good start. After the walk off the night before, it really kind of got them on a roll, I think. And then we saw what happened, in the Dodgers series. So, yeah, good.
Yeah, pitching has been the story. I mean, that's the thing that everyone's looking at so far. I think exceeding expectations. We see the Friday night game, another great outing for Justin Steele. 7 innings, 3 hits, 2 earned runs, 8 strikeouts. Of course, he gets 8 strikeouts when last time he pitched, I had 5 strikeouts in the over, and that did not hit. He only had 3. So, no, this was a great outing, and we saw the return of Seiya Suzuki in that game, also hitting the home run. We'll get to the offense in a second, but I want to talk about the pitching and how great it is. Have you had a chance coming out of that Seattle series last time they were home, Ryan? For the pitchers, is this something? Did they expect to be off to as hot of a start as they actually are? When we look at guys like Stroman, Steele, and of course Smiley with his great outing again.
Well, I think if you ask Marcus Stroman, like, he would tell you that he expected this, right? The way he's been pitching. But one thing I'll give him credit for is that he keeps talking about how much the World Baseball Classic kind of helped him, and he had to get into game shape pretty quickly. Didn't have obviously a spring training starts in mid-February, but within 3 weeks he's pitching in like actual meaningful games. He's not pitching in the Cactus League, and so he talks about how the WBC is just one of those things that got him going right away. And you see it. You see that he was already game shape ready by the time the season started. He's had 3 straight quality starts to start the year. Justin Steele has blown me away based on on how he's pitched this year. He's looked awesome, and I mean, I don't have the numbers in front of me right now, but I tweeted something after that Friday game, like, since he became a dad on July 11th, 2022, since he became a dad, he's putting up Cy Young type numbers. Like, he has like a 10.1 strikeout per 9 ratio. I think it's like a 2.9 walk per 9. Like, he's putting up crazy numbers, and I'm not saying it's only because of Bo, his son, that he's been pitching like this. Probably doesn't help, but he's like, you saw it last year when he started to improve some things. You thought that he could be a pretty good pitcher for this ball club, but he's going out and he's been arguably their best pitcher so far this year.
I've got your tweet. I've got your tweet right here. Since Justin Steele became a dad on July 11th, 2022, also his 27th birthday, a 1.46 ERA, 1.103 WHIP, 10.1 Ks per 9, and a 2.9 walk per 9. So, yeah, absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, which is all-star numbers. And, Tyone had a better start in LA than he did the first couple times around. Drew Smiley, since he got lit up in Cincinnati, he's had 2 pretty good outings. His Sunday start was good too. Wisniewski, which that's crazy, as we're sitting here saying Wisniewski's been, of the 5 starters, had the worst start that you didn't expect. So, but just overall, then you look at the bullpen, and they've been really, really good. And so you'd think you came in with the expectation that pitching was going to be the barometer of success or failure for the team in 2023. And they've come out and pitched really, really well overall. And it's also one of those things where you're not saying like, oh, they surprised and when is the other shoe going to drop? Like, you actually think that most of what they're doing as far as pitching goes could actually last for the season, because that's just how the team was built. They were built around good pitchers that are going to give you good outings, good bullpen guys that are going to come out of the bullpen and pitch pretty well. And they got the depth. So even if one of those 5 starters or bullpen guys, has to miss time for an injury or whatever it is, they got depth of pitchers that they believe in that can come up and not let that pitching staff miss the beat. So to answer your question, yes, a long-winded answer. They expected to be this good as far as pitching goes to come out. They expected to perform like this, and not that everyone outside of the organization expected that, but I think we all thought they could do pretty well pitching. And yeah, they've lived up at least to maybe beyond my expectations, I'd say. Not that I was expecting them to be bad or anything, but they've still kind of surprising, impressive, even more than what I could have expected them to come out of the season.
Could anyone have predicted, Jeremy, a 4-2 week for the Cubs?
It definitely wasn't me who predicted a 4-2 week for the Cubs. Can confirm that. You, Pat, bringing the optimism last week. We were not prepared for it.
Yeah.
So.
I'm usually more guarded, but I was optimistic last week. And I'll tell you, today's win was, I think, for me anyway, a more meaningful win than some of the other ones, in the sense that Saturday night, I watched that awful game at the end, the whole game actually, just to get to the end. Yay. Saturday night's game was a real rough one because the Cubs had a 1-0 lead. It's really it's demoralizing for your pitching staff, for your starter in particular, and for the whole team when you blow a lead like that, especially when the Cubs had a chance to add more runs in the eighth and didn't. It's just one of those really rough games. And I think in the course of a season, there's at least a dozen games where, maybe, a little bit more than a dozen, where you're like, either, gosh, I can't believe we blew that game, or you're like, oh, we really stole one there, thank God, and you're just happy to get away with the win. And that was one of those games where I felt like, wow, we really blew one there that we had in our grasp and then let get away. And for a team like this, especially for a team that hasn't had the long track record of success that maybe some prior teams have had, I thought it was really important that they come back today. And in frankly, a very similar situation, when you hadn't necessarily predicted that you'd have the lead against Urias and go all the way to the ninth inning, and then you get a man on base, and you're like, oh, brother, please don't let this happen again. And it didn't. And I thought that was nice because it showed some resiliency and bounce back from the team. You really don't want to have that happen back-to-back days, especially on the road, at a tough place like LA, where you're playing a really good team. And, I just thought it was really important that they come back and close that one out today, and they did. And I think that is a good sign moving forward for this team.
The Friday night game and today was Patrick Wisdom today. We had Friday. You had Gomes with 2 home runs. Suzuki, like I mentioned, hitting a home run in his return. We watch this, we see this, and not the finest hour for some Cubs fans on Twitter trying to dunk on Wilson Contreras after Yan Gomes' performance. We should be rooting for the success of players we like, even when they don't play for our teams anymore. I was not happy to see that. I know you weren't either, Pat. I don't know if you saw that, Ryan, on Twitter.
Yeah, I've seen it.
I just think it seems petty and small, frankly. Yeah. And I've always been somebody who, especially for players that wanted to stay on your team and basically were kicked off the team, So, yeah, I'll root for Kyle Schwarber to do well because he was basically cut. I'll root for, Baez and Bryant and Darvish and Rizzo because they were traded. They were sent away, right, against their will, against their desire. And the same goes for Contreras, who desperately wanted to resign there, and they said no. And, they have the reasons for that. But you know what? We don't have to, hold it against him. I know people are mad because he made comments afterwards about how he liked being in St. Louis, blah, blah, blah. But you know what? I'm sure the guy's kind of hurt from the whole thing. And I don't think any of us ever said that he was the most mature baseball player we'd ever run across in the first place, right? So it doesn't surprise me that he made those comments. I think that was him expressing his either what you call that, anger or sadness, whatever, but
frustrations and disappointment all around. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't want to go, and they said, nope, we're going to trade you, and then they didn't trade him. He had to play the next couple of months, which was probably a painful experience. And then sure enough, they ended up getting rid of him, and okay, fine, that's baseball. They have their business reasons for doing it, but from his vantage point, I'm sure he was hurt by the whole thing, and that was his kind of way of letting that be known, I think. And, fine, I'm sure 5 years from now or 3 years from now, he's not going to be, on the same sort of, I just think that's the kind of thing that can blow over. So I just hope people can be a little bit more charitable under the circumstances. especially for a guy who's played his entire career in one organization. They're people too. They really are. So
yeah, I'm very curious to see what happens on May 8th when the Cardinals are at Wrigley Field and Wilson Contreras makes his return to Wrigley Field. And I really want to know how much of Cubs Twitter is actually going to be at Wrigley Field that day, because if you look at Cubs Twitter, you're going to be expecting a loud round of boos.
Can't
if
be
they're
possible.
not there, you may actually get some cheers. If Cubs Twitter has taken over Wrigley Field that day, I'll be expecting some boos, but I guess we'll see.
No, I hope that Wilson Contreras returns and gets a thunderous ovation from the crowd. I hope he takes as much time as he wants. Get his strike penalty from the umpire for basking in all of the applause.
Just stand there and strike out. Take 3 in a row. I'll applaud the entire time.
We will applaud. We will not stop applauding. I hope he does get the ovation he deserves. I also thought that it was horrendous that when that happened to Cody Bellinger. Here his return to Dodger Stadium, the Dodgers fans acknowledge him. He takes a moment to acknowledge the fans, and in
the
return,
fun police come out.
is penalized a pitch clock violation. I hope that when we're in the robo-ump era, and people say, I miss when we had home plate umpires, that we can just pull up this clip of Jim Wolf giving Cody Bellinger the pitch clock violation, and you can see that even the Dodgers play-by-play announcer said, "Read the room, Jim," in what was an awesome quote.
Yeah.
But Ryan, I couldn't believe it.
I hope that we have robo-ups just because I want an umpire that's more compassionate than the ones we have now.
Well, I saw something that when Tucker Barnhart, when the Cubs were in Cincinnati and Barnhart got a little bit of an extra round of applause because he was there for a while. But that I want to say, someone on the Reds gave the umpire a heads up that this one might happen. I wonder if someone from the Dodgers just forgot to give, I forgot the home plate umpire's name. If they happened to get or not give him a heads up, like, hey, Cody Bellinger might get a little bit of a cheer and an ovation from the crowd because he was an MVP.
He played
right?
here. Yeah, he was an MVP Rookie of the Year and helped us win the World Series. But by the way,
Yeah. So maybe someone forgot, hey, maybe a little bit, because umpires have discretion for that. They cannot call that. So
he knew what was happening and chose to call it. Unacceptable.
You can dust off the damn plate, right? That's what you can do.
Exactly.
Stops the clock.
Well, we do a game called on our show, Who You Got? And, we make our picks for player of the game, whatever. We keep track and we do that. And Luke Stuckmeyer, my co-host, picked Bellinger that day. And then that happened. And I said in our Slack channel, I said, normally I would say Luke loses a point for Cody Bellinger getting a pitch clock violation, but I'll let it slide because that was pretty lame.
Yeah, so lame. Although quite the highlight. I don't know if Pat, on your bingo card, you had Cody Bellinger robbing Jason Hayward of a home run, Hayward playing for the Dodgers and Bellinger playing for the Cubs, and that happening.
Of course I did.
Yeah.
No, I did not. I will say this about Hayward too. I hope Hayward has a good season. I hope he does well. He's a class act. I'd like him to play well. But when he's playing against the Cubs, I want Bellinger to catch that ball every time. So, I think two things can be true, right? You can root for your team, but when a player's not playing your team and it doesn't have an impact on the outcome of your team, it's fine to root for that player too. And I guess I harken back to my youth when the Cubs let two of my favorite players go, one Greg Maddux and two Andre Dawson. And I rooted for them their whole careers. I would look at the box scores every day they were playing and say, oh, good. I wanted them to succeed and I wanted them to make the Hall of Fame and be really good. And even if the team had given up on them for various reasons or was too cheap in some cases to pay for them, I'm still going to be a fan of theirs because they're some of my favorite players. And I think I would hope that sentiment will prevail long term when it comes to Cubs fandom. We'll see.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of one of those things where, specific to Jason Hayward, where how good of a person he is. He does so much stuff in the community. He, everyone talks about his clubhouse leadership and all that. And He's one of those guys you like you just want to do well because it feels like he deserves it, right? Like he does so many other things like good. And he's like a good person, and he's a genuine person to talk to, and is willing to give you his time to talk to. And you feel bad because he doesn't perform, but you're like,
Yeah,
this is someone that you root to be good because he feels like he deserves it because he does so many other things the right way. So
it's
I'm
not
with you
because
with
he was
Hayward.
lazy or didn't try or didn't want to
Yeah,
do
right.
well. The guy's in great shape.
Yeah.
He does everything he can, and I'm sure, for as much as it pains people to see him perform poorly, how do you think he feels? He's got to feel the
Exactly.
worst of anybody.
Exactly.
So when we talk about poor performance and some challenging performance, all eyes are on first base in the situation here with Hosmer and the clock ticking on when Matt Mervis will be called up to join the big league club. As of yesterday, he's hitting almost 300. He's got 3 home runs, 13 RBIs in Iowa, and 13 walks to 9 strikeouts. So he's continuing to progress and try to put pressure on the big league club to have to make a decision here. Ryan, how do you see this playing out here?
That's so tough to predict because I know how much Hosmer's another one of those guys like a Hayward type. Like his results have been a little bit better than I was expecting, but I know the underlying numbers kind of tell you that won't last. But he's like another guy that has a lot of respect in that clubhouse. And,
that's all we hear is that he's a really good clubhouse
yeah,
guy and everything.
yeah, good clubhouse guy, good teammate, like does the right things. And I know that David Ross values that, and the organization just values that because that's as far as culture goes, like that's a guy who's going to help build a winning culture. He's another guy he may not be performing like it anymore, but he's a guy that was doing it at a high level and succeeding at a high level for a long time.
There's a value to that. I agree 100%.
Yeah.
Like there really is,
100%
especially on a younger we've got younger players on that team who you want to sort of mirror their performance. Horner's still fairly young, but I'm talking about the Wisniewskis and soon to be the Morels and some of the other guys. Yeah, you want somebody like that for them, Hughes, whatever, to see and say, oh, okay, well that's how I want to conduct myself.
Yeah, Mervis himself, like that's if he's going to be this first baseman of the future for the Cubs, then maybe you do show him like, hey, Eric Hosmer may not be what he was, but 6 or however many years ago it was, like he was a very, very good player for a very, very good team in the Royals. Like he's a guy who did it before, like learn after him kind of thing. So as far as how this shakes out, like Mervis, like if he continues at the tear he's been on, like he will force the Cubs' hand and make them have to make a decision. Hosmer, as it goes, he's a minimum salary player right now, veteran minimum. It wouldn't take a whole lot for the Cubs to cut ways with him, especially if he's not performing. I can't give a timeline, right? I don't want to give a timeline because I don't want to say, oh, Mervis will be up by latest June, right? But then all of a sudden, Eric Hosmer and Trey Mancini are both performing so well, they don't have to make that move. Like I don't want to say that, but I'm like, if things go how we like, where we put our expectations of, Eric Hosmer's underlying numbers don't say this isn't sustainable. His numbers will eventually drop. And Trey Mancini, if he doesn't really improve his performance over the next however many weeks, like, and Matt Mervis is, then you start to see a scenario where, hey, like our first base duo is performing really badly. It may be time to bring Mervis up again. I don't want to put a date on it. I want to say myself that like summer, like June-ish, like that first beginning of summer might be a thing. We'll go. June. No. I would myself say like June. If it's like that's not like a too early or too late. Like that's probably a sweet spot right there. Of we've seen the first 2 months go by. Mervis can be up now, kind of thing. I don't think they'll rush him up. He doesn't have a ton of AAA at bats yet. Just considering he was only in AAA for I want to say a couple months last year.
No, that's
so they're not going to rush
point.
him.
That's a great point. Is that they don't have to rush him, and they can always say, "Hey, if they like what's happening at the big league level, they can say like, hey, pump the brakes. He just got to AAA. He needs some more time. Or they could always say he's got to work on his defense. That's their favorite thing to say. Chris Bryant-esque. But no, they've got. He definitely doesn't have a ton of at-bats, and they can't just, shouldn't be expected to just hand the job to him, and can let him get some additional seasoning and time there. But boy, I feel like it's going to be one of those Schwarber situations where they called him up for a little bit, and he looked great, and everyone got excited, and then they sent him back down again. So I'm preparing myself for that.
It could very well be, and again, we don't know how this first base battle might shake out. Like, someone, injuries happen,
sure,
bad performances happen, like all that kind of stuff plays into baseball and the uncertainty of the game over 162. I do expect Matt Mervis to be up at some point this year. I think he will actually be, by the end of the season, play a big role on the team. And just the timing is one of those things where it's like we're a little over 2 weeks into the season now, going on 3, something like that. Like, there's a whole lot of time to let things and small sample sizes and whatever. There's a whole lot of time to let these things play out before Matt Mervis needs to be up.
Let's look ahead to the upcoming week. The Cubs continue the West Coast road trip in Oakland for 3 games. Man, Oakland is a sad, sad sight right now.
Terrible team.
Terrible team. You got to feel terrible for that fan base. The team is actively, aggressively trying to leave, and it's a bad scene out in Oakland. So those are 3 incredibly winnable games for this team.
Yeah, and I'm not saying the Cubs have to sweep the A's, but after what they should take, they should, right? But especially after beating Texas, beating Seattle, beating LA in 3-game series, 3 straight. If the Cubs drop a series in Oakland, that's going to put a damper on a lot of the good vibes they've gotten over the last week and a half, 2 weeks.
Yeah, a lot of different tone to next week's podcast if they get swept here.
If you win 2 out of 3, you can't complain because, it's baseball, right? No. Even the bad teams win 1 out of 3. But you're right. If you get swept, then all of a sudden you're below 500. And now you're like, it's funny how it's so early in the season, right? It's so, you just one little 3-game series could be the difference between great optimism versus just complete, failure and defeat. And and just to, when you look at some of the guys who are struggling now, like a Mancini and some of the guys who are not necessarily hitting the catchers, whatever, the way you would hope. All I could say is just look at last year on this date when Jonathan Villar was hitting 500 with an OPS of 1.079. Jason Hayward had an OPS of 844, but yet Nico Horner was down at 520, ready to be relegated to the minors, right? And it just shows you just how volatile things are early on like this. So
I mean that game, the Yan Gomes game, right? He had 2 home runs. His WRC plus went from 2 to 89 in 1 night. There you go.
Yeah, his OPS plus was like -24 going into the next game or something like that. And now he's made up a lot of that just off really the benefit of that one game, and he's
exactly.
I think he's up to his OPS plus is 97 now. That sounds pretty flashy. Better than -24.
The first 2 months of this podcast is all about managing small sample sizes and just dealing with small sample sizes here. That's what we have to do for this first 2 months, much like the Cubs are doing.
And it's hard because you
get
excited when you're doing well. You want to extrapolate the good parts out, right?
Yeah.
Look at this rotation. With the rotation like this, we're going to win close to 100 games. Well, yes, we would win close to 100 games if they pitched like this the entire season. But there are injuries, as you pointed out, Ryan, and guys come back down to earth, and all kinds of stuff happens, and that's why it's baseball, and they play such a long, grueling 162 game season because they really want to get to the playoffs, and they want to make sure when they have those 1-game playoffs that they have just the best teams in there, don't they?
Yeah.
So then after the Cubs ideally take 2 of 3, if not all 3 games in Oakland. They come back home to play 4 against the Dodgers. Now, this will be tough because Steele and Stroman are pitching against Oakland. So you won't have either of those two here as the Dodgers come to town.
Yeah. No, yeah, that's you're going to be looking for, especially, Tyone. Like I said, he had a better start in LA than he did his first 2 times on the mound. Smiley's had a couple of good starts. Wisniewski's the guy you're looking at. When he gets up there, he's going to have because he pitches Monday, I want to say, in Oakland.
Yes.
He pitches that first game, so he's gonna get one against LA at home, and it's gonna be one of those things where he has to step up.
He has to be competitive, right?
Yeah,
we want to get bounced around.
Yeah, no, we want to manage the expectations around Wisniewski. I think the people, like the rational people, didn't expect him to be Cy Young coming out of the gate going into this season. But he's also performed even worse than we expected. So they're going to need him to step up against an LA team, number one, that wants to get a little bit of retribution for losing 2 of 3 at home. But 2, that's just it's a playoff caliber team, a really good team. And they're going to look at, hey, we got a rookie pitcher coming off a couple. He started the season pretty poorly. Don't know what's going to happen in Oakland yet, but that may be a date where you need to see something really good out of Wisniewski. So,
or at least not get batting around batting practice. Yeah. I mean, he's got these. It's not, his control hasn't been the best, but it's not like he's walking 7 guys a game either. So, but boy, they hit him hard last time.
Yeah.
And he's young, but you don't want a Caleb Killian situation where you have him pitch for several games, completely destroy his confidence, send him to the minors, and never hear from him again. I mean, you'd like for him to bounce back and have a game, because there's no rule that says you can't have a young pitcher succeed. Other teams do it all the time.
Yep.
And then the homestand continues with the San Diego Padres coming in for 3. So this is a tough homestand, 7 games against 2 really tough teams, playoff caliber teams here in both LA and San Diego. So this will be a real test.
And they play 10 games against bad teams. So if they can hold their own, win 2 out of 3 from Oakland, hold your own against LA and San Diego, right? And then you play Miami, Washington, Miami. That should be a breather, hopefully.
It's a better stretch.
Speaking of Miami, you saw the whole kerfuffle over the Friday, April 28th game, I guess. The Miami Marlins released a press release, right? So advertising that Friday, the 20-year anniversary, although it's not the exact anniversary, 20-year anniversary anyway, of the Game 6 of the NLCS, and they're saying, it's a Bartman game, which I thought was particularly cruel because, the guy is like a private citizen. I wasn't happy that he interfered with the ball the minute it happened from my seat in the stands, but come on, right? That's cruel. Even if it was a player on the Cubs who did something, boneheaded.
Yeah, if they were having an Alex Gonzalez booted the ball at short game. It's still not nice. More sense. Yeah,
it'd make more sense. It'd still be pathetic, though, right?
Yeah, it still wouldn't be tasteful.
Yeah. You don't celebrate other people's failures as an organization.
I think the Marlins came out and said that was something that was an error. It was not, wasn't supposed to go out or something like that. But it's also but you made it in the first place.
Somebody made it and they sent it out. That's not an error. An error is if you misspelled Bartman, right?
Yeah, no, it was seeing that it was like you said, Patrick, this in poor taste for sure. I guess I'm glad they're not doing it in a sense, but it's just that was not the best look for the Miami Marlins to throw out there.
And as a fan base, I would hope that the Miami fans would demand more of their team. Very much in the same way that I hope Cubs fans, demand that if the Cubs decided, which I don't think they ever would, but if they did decide to do something that kind of cheesy, not even cheesy, but just cruel. If your team's going to be cruel, you should step up and say, "Hey, come on, guys, that's ridiculous."
Yeah.
I hope people are not cruel to Contreras. He's when he gets here and call names, but but you could root for the Cubs and root for him to do poorly that game. But
that game,
yeah, no,
exactly, yeah.
yeah.
After a tremendous
God
ovation.
God help me if in 2043 we have a Contreras socked him flat, and he went to the Cardinals game or something weird. Let's avoid that.
All right. So Pat, you were so good on your predictions last week that I'll have you go first, and then we'll have Ryan do a prediction on what the Cubs record looks like for next week. Oakland and the Dodgers.
I'm afraid if I announce
7 games of the next 7.
Fewer people are going to watch Marquee, and the ratings are going to go down. And I don't know. Are you sure you want the actual my forecast here? Because
people want to know what games.
Spot on.
Yeah, should they tune in? Yeah, they want to know.
So here's the deal: the Cubs are going to go 4-3 this week. So don't be too upset with that. That's still above 500.
Okay, 4-3.
I'm not. That's what I had in my head. They're 8-6 right now, so I guess we'd say 12-9 at the end of the week. And I'm not going to tell you if I'm predicting
you don't have to
a 3-game sweep. There will be a combination of 4 wins, I think, after this.
Yeah, you have to leave something to the imagination, right? I'm giving them the results and the weekly results, but they have to figure out the day-by-day results. I'm not otherwise like FanDuel or DraftKings. Sign me up as a sponsor. I don't want that.
There you go.
I think that's possible. I think 3 wins is also very possible this week as well. So I will be the pessimistic member of the panel. I'll say 3. It's a 3-win week for the Cubs.
When are you going to learn, Jeremy? It's different here.
Next started already. Next started here already.
That's right.
Yeah.
Pat, we are up against time. Any other questions? Any other questions for Ryan before we let him go?
Thank you for asking. I do have a question for Ryan, actually, as it turns out. Ryan, I want to know what area of this team, early on as it is, do you feel the Cubs need to, if the Cubs could focus on upgrading at a position externally, not like, oh, well, we'll just bring up Morale or we'll just bring up Mervis or, something like that, but externally and also realistically, like, don't tell me, oh, we'll just go get Ohtani and that'll solve all the problems. Of course it will. But what realistically do you think the Cubs should be looking at right now if they continue to perform well, as we head into June, what is it that they should be doing?
As far as just one position, I mean, like, part of me wants to say, the back end of the bullpen. I think Fulmer is a good pitcher. I think Brad Boxberger is a good pitcher, and I think there's if they gave Adbert Alzolay a chance to close, I think he'd do pretty well. We know Keegan can do that whole come in the 7th inning and finish the game from there. But at points, and I think we always have, no one worries about what the Cubs are going to do with their bullpen, right? Like, we know, they're going to bring in some random veteran, he's going to pitch well, and they're going to be fine. But you look at Saturday and a game where Michael Fulmer just kind of, he blew the save. That's what it was. And not that every closer is going to close out every game and get every save, convert every save opportunity, but now people are a little timid when Michael Fulmer comes out of the bullpen after that, and I think he had he blew the save against Seattle too, so that's back-to-back blown saves. And again, nothing to take away from Fulmer. I think he's a good pitcher, but the back end of the bullpen, if you're going to be a very, very good pitching staff, which the Cubs could go out and add an ace, right? Like you mentioned Ohtani, but adding an ace like that would be pretty cool. But if you're going to be in a lot of close games like this Cubs offense, like how they're built, this home run barrage in LA is probably not going to be the norm. They're going to be in a lot of close games. You need a back end bullpen that's going to shut other teams down. So I don't think they completely have that with Brad Boxberger and Michael Fulmer back there. I do think if there's one group they need to add or look to add externally, it's just short, like the back end of the bullpen, like get someone who you feel good about throwing, even if it's the 8th inning or 9th inning. Like, you feel good, you put them out there, set it and forget it, and you feel confident that they're going to get the job done.
Realistically, do you think that Albert Alzolay could end up filling that role for this team or no?
Like I said, I think the way that the bullpen is going, I don't know that he'll certainly get that opportunity. I don't have any confidence in that. But I think if we get later in the season and David Ross decides to test him out as a closer type thing, I think he could perform pretty well. I think he has the stuff. I think if you're not exposing him to too many lefties, as we know historically he hasn't been great against, I think Adbert has the ability and the stuff and the repertoire to actually be a pretty good closer. I don't know that I would say he would ever be on like an Edwin Diaz level kind of thing, but I think given the opportunity, if that were ever to happen, like Adbert could be pretty solid in that role.
My backup desire is another, and by another I mean assuming that Pat Mervis is already there, another left-handed power hitter. I would like to have 2 in the lineup. Sort of like a Schwarber-Rizzo thing when they had those guys. Especially as they advance in the second half, if they are going to be a playoff team, I think that would go a long way towards having a more balanced lineup.
Yeah, no, I agree. And hey, you get to the offseason, Shohei Ohtani, he could be your ace and your left-handed bat.
Absolutely.
And then you're good, right?
Yeah, those
sure.
lucky Dodgers.
That easy. It's that easy.
The Dodgers showing us how a big market team can do it. Unfortunately, small market Cubs just can't compete with the kind of stuff that LA is doing. So we'll see those Dodgers this weekend. Again, thank you to Ryan for taking time out to talk Cubs with us. Time flies here. We're already at the end of the show. Please, Ryan, remind all of our listeners where they can find your work on the internet.
Yeah, so you can find, you mentioned it earlier, CHGO. You can go to allchgo.com. You find all my work there. You can find, work from the whole company there. You can find me on Twitter at Ryan_A_Herrera. Those are my 2 big things, allchgo.com and Twitter. So you want to go read some of my stuff, it's all there.
Excellent. And you can follow us on Twitter as well at WrigleyvilleNat. Same for Instagram. And WrigleyvilleNation.com has all of the links for you to subscribe to this podcast via your podcatcher of choice. We're available every single place. We're working on getting the YouTube channel up and running so that we can have a video version of this podcast as well. I know CHGO does a ton of good video content.
I completely neglected to mention our YouTube page, CHGO Sports. You find all of our podcasts and YouTube shows on there too.
So while you're there subscribing to their podcast and their shows, make sure that you search for Wrigleyville Nation Podcast. We're going to be adding more content. Currently, it's just the audio version as a placeholder. Videos coming soon. And then, we've got a Patreon as well. We're able to be ad-free on this show because of the wonderful, wonderful patrons who've supported us over the years. We're talking years we've gone ad-free thanks to all of the listeners that support us at patreon.com/Wrigleyville Nation. Without them, we couldn't do this show. We'd be running those ads that Pat hates to read, and it's no good. And so everyone's keeping it right at the level we need so that we can invest every penny right back into the show and continue to bring you the ad-free experience. So if you want to support the show, every little bit helps. It's patreon.com/Wrigleyville Nation. Again, WrigleyvilleNation.com has all the links I just described and every way you can support the show. And with that, we're calling it a podcast. Pat, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Thanks again, everyone, for listening, and we'll talk to you again next time.